And so it might seem very negative that our spiritual life as Catholics and things in the world are going in a certain confusing direction and alienating us in some ways. However, God is using this, I believe, God is using this kind of thing to call people back to their hearts, where the divine presence is.
Hello and welcome to HLI Ireland's Let's Talk series. My name is Lisa O'Hare. This week, the Poor Clares of Faughart in County Louth released a beautiful video entitled How Wonderful Is My Soul. In the video, the sisters invite viewers to meditate with them and indeed with St. Clare. It's the beginning of a series, and today I spoke with Sister Bridget O'Hare about her inspiration behind the series, and we explored the practice of Catholic meditation and how important it is in these times. Sister Bridget, you're very welcome to the show. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and about the order that you're from?
Sure, and thanks for your welcome. It's lovely to be with you and lovely to chat and lovely for everyone else. Delighted to talk to you. I'm a Poor Clare sister, and my monastery is in Faughart, where St. Bridget was born in County Louth, just about a mile or less from her shrine. And that's where my monastery is. But we also have a second outreach to Grange in Carlingford, where we've set up a small meditation hermitage garden so that we're a contemplative presence in the parish here. But a monastery is still our community. So that's who I am, and our life is contemplative.
I'll have to tell our listeners too the joint surnames, we are actually related, so it's a blessing to be part of the O'Hare family. Okay, so Sister Bridget, as I explained in the introduction, I was really moved when I watched your video. The video was entitled How Wonderful Is My Soul. Could you tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind this video, this enterprise that you and the sisters have undertaken, and give us maybe just a brief summary of what it's all about?
Sure. Well, here in Grange, we have a meditation community, and we met regularly over the past 3 years. But of course, with COVID, we can't meet anymore, and they've been missing it very much. So initially, we just got the inspiration, well, we'll make meditation YouTubes for them and just send them out to them. But we have a huge feedback from different parts of the world at this stage, and they seem to have been very well received. Now, we've just started with the first one, and we're hoping to do a series, and every meditation will be guided by a saint. So it's important that it's the saints that we're being led by, not by anybody else. So we're very careful about that.
So the videos, as I said, you've alluded to there, they've got an amazing response. Something about them is even beyond just a communication between your sisters. It's reached into something that I believe the world really needs to hear at the minute. We're living in a time of great confusion and indeed great fear. And also we, over the last few years, particularly in Ireland and just in wider society, a lot of the foundations of our society have been eroded. Things that we would have depended upon with regard to our marriage, family, life, the role of the state, our education, all of these building blocks, medicine, have been eroded, and people are feeling quite bewildered. And also within that, now the expression of our faith is also quite unrecognizable with regard to all of the regulations that people are now bound by in churches. You're seeing signs in churches saying keep your distance, and to me the Catholic faith has always been a very visible, it's the mix between the temporal and the spiritual, and what we see and smell and hear and witness in the church reflects our faith. And now there's a great distortion of that, and there's a great confusion. So can you explain why you think meditation and entering more into the deeper parts of our soul is now more important than ever?
Yes, and nothing is outside the providence of God. If God allows things to happen, even though they're not good things, God permits them through his holy will, it's because God has some good purpose in mind in the end. It doesn't matter what it is, what that happens. And so it might seem very negative that our spiritual life as Catholics and things in the world are going in a certain confusing direction and alienating us in some ways. However, God is using this, I believe, God is using this kind of thing to call people back to their hearts, where the divine presence is. That lovely psalm, come back to me with all your heart. It's a beautiful calling. And God calls us back. And in a certain sense, while we do need, and I'm not for 1 minute underestimating the externals of our faith and of our religious practice, we certainly need them. But there is also the reality that unless that's all built on an inner encounter with the divine, it then becomes just an external practice. So God is correcting the balance, because the time will come more and more where if we don't have the inner experience in the heart of the divine presence, we will not know where to go, because this world is going to become more and more confusing, because that's the path that it's taking. So God is preparing us for what is yet to come. And so I believe that if people can be rooted again in the divine presence, in the promises of Jesus, where he said, anyone who loves me, I will come to that person, and my Father will come to that person, and we shall live in that person. And I will reveal myself to that person. Now, we've lost this. We think it's all out there. And so Jesus wants to correct that. And meditation, or as I would call it, contemplation, is the highest form of prayer that brings us to that encounter with the divine. So God is taking care of us through these negative things.
So he's calling us to the higher form of prayer. And it's a prayer maybe that as Irish Catholics, as you said, the balance has maybe been lost. We would have been maybe be guilty of becoming very ritualized and very routine. And we have, as Human Life International, we have seen over the last few years how there has been a disconnect by so-called practicing Catholics who are then, for example, voting for abortion or voting against God's plan for marriage. So there is certainly, as you say, a disconnect between the two. And maybe this is what God wants to correct by bringing us more deeper within ourselves. And one of the quotes that you used, and I'll put it up for our listeners, is that you said that there's a beyond that we can't quite grasp, but this beyond is within us.
That's correct. That's correct. And that beyond it's the kingdom of heaven. Jesus said that. And so in a certain sense, we do need the external practice of our faith. But my observation from looking at the church, I see a lot of what I would call a kind of cultural Catholicism. And now, I'm not being negative about people who've been brought up in the culture of Catholicism. That's wonderful. But they're ending up with just, I go to Mass because that's the culture around here. We do that. I've had people come to me for spiritual direction, admitting that the only reason they go to Mass is because of what the neighbors might think if they didn't, you know, and because it's the culture at that, So the Lord wants us, no. We must discover a personal encounter with the divine, and that's what sustains us. And yes, and if you have just cultural Catholicism, you will get this split thing happening where people will go to Mass and yet vote against the will of God. It's like crazy, because they don't know the inner love of the divine presence that's guiding their lives and what the divine will is.
Yes. And one of the other, as I said, I'll pick out some of the quotes that really struck me. A quote that was in your video was that the outer world is not our real reality. We have to take time out of the world and enter into the essence of our own being. And just if you'd reflect upon that for us for a second, because many people are bewildered at the sense that what was real. We seem to be living in almost an alternate reality, nothing that was before. People
Yeah.
call it this new normal,
Yes.
and they're frightened by the fact that their externals are so different, not even just with regard to faith, but with regard to how they're engaging with society and how they're moving with even just shopping and all the rest of it. Can you explain that whole idea of our real reality?
Yes. I suppose in some ways I should have said our total reality. There is a certain reality to the fact that the world is out there. It's like it's real, it's out there. But it isn't the totality of us. And what happens for people, if we think the world and the way people react to us is all that matters, so to speak, or what's out there is what matters, or image is what matters, or how we impress people, or how we succeed, or what we have, all these things. But that isn't us. That's just a construct that we've invented in our mind, and we think that's going to get us by in this life. But the us, the real person, is a person inside who carries a lot of hurts and wounds and pasts and stories that nobody knows, and yet that person is the person where the divine compassion wants to reach.
Yeah.
The divine compassion, and hold that person in love, because beyond that again, there is the pure soul that God created, and it is so beautiful. I think it was St. Catherine of Siena who said, if we could see what a soul in the state of grace looks like, we would bow down and worship it, because we would think it was God. So beautiful is it, because it's made in the image of God. Now that's our reality. We are made in God's image. That's our reality. I have many people coming to me for spiritual direction with a lot of pain around self-esteem and issues like that. And it's actually a deception. God help them. They don't know how beautiful God has made them. And they're trying to get that from the world to say, oh, you're beautiful, you're this. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I don't
Yeah.
want to go on too long
No, well,
about
that's
that.
very much pervaded into our culture. As you said before, there are so many wounds. We're all carrying so many wounds. And that's what I found beautiful. Again, you said it was Meister Eckhart that said there's a place where within the soul that's never been wounded. And that is that pure place that we strive for.
Yeah.
But as you've just touched upon there, we have so many issues with regard to mindfulness and all of the self-esteem that people are running to build themselves up, and they're searching for this affirmation in the wrong place.
That's right.
If you were speaking to your own, like say the people that come to you for spiritual direction, or if we're talking now to young people out there, or to our own viewers who have these issues, how can they simply, this might sound all very theological to them, what would you say to someone who's struggling right now with their identity with regard to what we're talking about in a simple way?
Yes, well, I mean, of course, it is complex, but we have been given our identity by God. A society might demand another one from us so that it's impressed by us, but it's not the real one. God has given each one of us. We're told in the book of Revelation that when we go into the next life, when we come into our eternal life, God has a white stone, that's a metaphor, a white stone on which is written your name, and he will reveal it to you in the next life. And it's a symbol used in the book of Revelation, and you'll be handed this stone and your name will be on it. Now, it might not be Lisa or Bridget, the name is your true identity will be revealed to you at last. Yeah. Your true identity. And this life, we're meant to move towards that because it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the journey in life is meant to be a spiritual path of coming into discovering our true identity. And we're going to discover, and we will discover it, to be just like God. And so what more self-esteem would you want?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's complex, it's profound,
yes. But it
know.
is something that you said, you have to consciously take time out
You have
to nurture. You know, this world is full of chaos and a noise and interruptions and phones and beeps, and you know, it's trying to take us away. And many people would say that is, you know, the evil one purposely causing so many distractions that we never enter into this kind of a peace. Now, you're very blessed that you have hermitages there. I've been
That's
privileged
right.
to visit them. You know, very many of us, we have to make very conscious efforts. But
That's
again,
right.
this is what this series is about, that you're beginning to lead us all. You know, you're blessed that this is your whole vocation. And we are
Yes.
now, thank God, through the gift of technology, being able to learn more about that vocation and enter into it, because it's part of all of our vocations, whether or
Oh, it
not we're
is. Oh,
consecrated
yeah.
sisters or not.
That's correct. Everyone is called to it. Everyone, every human being on the earth is called to this, you know. But Christ has shown us the way, you know. So he is the way.
Another of the aspects that I picked out that you mentioned was at the center of our being is a point of pure truth. Now, we live in an age where it is very difficult to find the truth about very many situations, not least the coronavirus and all that has gone along with that. And people, again, find that very unsettling. And, you know, the old faithful of going to your doctor or going to a certain person of a standing doesn't seem to exist anymore. For every doctor that gives you one opinion, you'll find another one online that's giving you a totally different one. How can you just elaborate a wee bit about that whole idea of this point of pure truth within ourselves, and then how that will give us a peace to exist in the chaos that we do find around ourselves?
Yes. Well, now we have to understand, first of all, that God has made provision for us around this. And we have to distinguish between what I would call, say, doctrinal truth, which we have to learn from the church, which teaches us the nature of God, the nature of our humanity, the nature of the will of God, the laws of God, and so on. That's doctrinal truth. And that is something that we have to use the mind to grasp. And we're taught that in our catechism as children and so on. So that's truth on that level. And the church is the holder of truth for us, and we're guided by the church. But now there is this point of pure truth in the meditation we're talking about, is the truth of our being and the unique truth of who we are in God. And only God can reveal that to us, but it's there. And we can be so deceived about ourselves. Like, we live in a lot of illusion about ourselves.
Yeah.
You have only to find that out in marriage, you know.
Let's not even start, go down that
We're not
road,
even
yeah.
start with that. Like, you know, we should see ourselves as others see us. We haven't a clue. You know, we don't realize how others are affected by us and so on. But it is beyond that. This is the truth of our essence, in the sense that we come home to that in the course of our lives. We come home to ourselves as God created us. And when we find it, we know, this is me. This is me. But it takes a lifetime, actually. And it's a journey. And it'll only be fulfilled in heaven, where we shed every false illusion we have about ourselves and see the me that God made and enter into the sheer freedom and joy of it forever. Like, that's the gift that's ahead of us.
And that word that you used, home, you know, it's so powerful within our own Irish, you know, culture. And that idea that if we're striving to go home, there's a warmth, there's a welcome. And, you know, I know for people now, you know, the idea of the truth setting us free and the truth giving us a peace, when we can find within ourselves what's important. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but you can correct me. To me, what it seems is, even if we're only on the journey home, we're not there yet. We're journeying, but we see the light of the hearth, and that is enough for us to weather the storms. You know, the what we see around us is that destination point, because I think so many people now are finding themselves where they have very few anchors, if any, to withstand this kind of a storm. So we may never find out the truth, as you said, about the coronavirus, for example, or about anything else that's going on in these government levels, and that's not for us to know. The saints found their true peace in all sorts of humble places. They didn't know what was going on in the top echelons of the church
That's
or in the
right.
government or the state, but they
Mm.
found a true peace that allowed them to, I suppose, act within the will of God, whether it be making a courageous stand or whether it's like Saint Therese doing something much simpler and within their own community.
Yes, but of course we must also remember that it's Jesus is the truth.
Yeah.
He is the truth. He says, I am the truth. And you remember Pilate saying, what is truth? Because nobody knows what the truth is. But Jesus says, I am the truth. So in a sense, when we get into that interior meditation, and that first one that's already been put out, it's whether you encounter Jesus within your own being, and he is the truth. And when you encounter that, you've come home to the truth of himself, of Jesus within yourself. And he does guide you. You develop a kind of sensitivity when something is not him in a
Yeah.
situation. You just grow in that over time.
Yeah.
And you just know this is not Jesus. I don't necessarily mean his person intervening. I mean, it doesn't have the feel of Jesus, because I
Yes.
know his presence. I know the feel of him from inside
Yeah.
myself, you know?
Very much so. And I think that's what we do have to cling to, often in these times. And the purpose again of this video and inviting you on is to give people a sense of somewhere to go to search and look for this truth, because people are finding themselves going to the latest YouTube video and it's the latest conspiracy theory or it's the latest news report. You've got extremes of news bulletins coming one direction, and then you've got alternative theories coming another direction. And what your
Yes,
video is, and what we're encouraging people to do, is go deeper within their faith first. And of
that's
course,
right.
we need to bring our intellect to every situation. But one of the, again, another quote that you said was that God has taken us out of the dominion of the darkness of this world and transferred us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. So for all of you who are fearing this world is becoming ever darker, you said it, Bridget, that he's brought us out of the dominion of darkness.
That's correct. That is right. And that is, I think, what we have to realize too, like I find this when I'm talking with people, they think there might be a neutral territory. Well, I mightn't be in the dominion of darkness, but like I'm okay. So I feel all right. No, there's no neutral territory. You're either in one or the other. And our Heavenly Father has taken us out of the dominion of darkness and transferred it into the kingdom of his beloved Son. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus has already brought it to the earth. It's on the earth, the kingdom of heaven. We pray that all the time. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The kingdom of heaven has come. We will not know it in its totality till after death, but it is here, and we can live in it now. And that's why we can talk to any of the saints whenever we like, whenever we want to, because they're in heaven with us on this earth. Like, it's all together.
Yeah.
But we don't perceive it in its entirety, and we either live in his kingdom or we're in a dominion of darkness. There's no in between. And now, there's lots of theological implications there, which we haven't time to go into. But nonetheless, I've forgotten the origin of your question. What is it you started with?
Just
Oh,
the
you
idea
meant
of the
that
darkness,
quote.
people
Yeah,
living in the dominion of darkness, or
yeah. The
removing us
darkness
from it.
tries to invade. Jesus told us that. The parable of the tares and the wheat, the two will be mixed up, and one is the kingdom of heaven and one is the dominion of darkness, and at the harvest, Christ will sort it all out. So it tries to invade our lives in different ways, and that's why we need the experience of Christ through our meditation practice, in that we know his light. We know the light of Jesus, and Jesus tells us in John's Gospel, my sheep know my voice, and they'll know when it's not my voice, because we've given that. But they're together, and yet we are either in one or the other. We're not in both, but the darkness does try to invade.
Well, that's a lie that we're very often sold. Obviously in the south of Ireland at the minute, they're talking about this dignity with dying bill, and basically euthanasia. And what it's the same tactics that they tried to use with regard to abortion. They're saying this is grey. It's not a black and white issue. It's grey, and this is how this sort of language It's like the Garden of Eden, this sort of twisted language seems to have
Yeah.
caught people unaware. And we're seeing history repeat itself so far in the dialogues that I've witnessed over this euthanasia issue. It's the same, language, compassion,
That's right.
versus dignity and mercy, and all of these words have been completely twisted. And what you're saying is that no, there's a very clear and distinct line between darkness and light, and between
That's right.
the light of truth and the lies of Satan.
That's correct. But he's subtle. He's subtle. After all, he was the angel of light. So he's subtle,
But again, this kind of meditation, gives us an opportunity to spend as much time. When you spend as much time with the light, you recognize the light. It doesn't blind you.
That's right.
Or the same with truth. When you spend so much time with him, who is the truth, you'll recognize then what's off.
That's
even if it takes time. Now, one of the, I'm sure you might be aware, but our viewers are very aware of HLI Ireland's devotion to the Holy Face. It's something that it's a devotion that we have promoted right throughout Ireland over the last number of years. Now, a very interesting aspect of your meditation, you spoke about St. Clare, and she talked about deep within the essence of ourselves, the pure part of our soul is as beautiful as Christ himself. In fact, it is his image within us. Can you just, briefly give us an idea of how can we reflect on the face of Christ within ourselves?
Yes, it's a very beautiful way to meditate, and it's been given to us by St. Clare right from the 13th century. And she speaks about Jesus and the face of Jesus, and to see it as a mirror. And when you look at it, it's really yourself you're looking at. And then, so as you know, in the meditation, she highlights all the different qualities of that beautiful face of Jesus and his gentleness and so on. Because that's what we are like. That he reflects back to us what we are like. Now, we know from our Catholic theology that Jesus came to reveal to us what God was like. Jesus is God manifest. So if you want to know what God's like, you look at Jesus. And Jesus is a manifestation of God. He is God. But what St. Clare is highlighting, yes, that is true. But he also reveals to us what a true human being is like. Because we're fallen human beings. We're not authentically, fully human beings as God created us to be. We're subject to the fall of Adam and Eve and original sin and the darkness that emanates from all of that. Yet, if we want to know what a true human being looks like, as God created us, and as we will ultimately become again, just look at him and you see yourself. Now, we're not talking about his features, we're talking about his qualities, his beauty, and all the divine nature that's in him. And in fact, when we come to the fullness of life, we will share in his divine nature as well as his human nature. People don't seem to realize that. We will be both divine and human like him, only it was his divinity. We don't have any of our own. And yet they hear it said at Mass all the time when the priest mingles the water with the wine. He says, by the mystery of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ, who humbles himself to share in our humanity. So we will be like him in every way, both his divinity and his humanity. Now, he's already offered this to us through baptism, but it's kind of buried, it's dormant. So the purpose of Catholic meditation is to uncover that, to encounter that in ourselves. And it's daily practice, because Jesus does the work. He says, I will reveal myself to that person.
It takes time. Maybe, what you're saying and what we're talking about today, it might even take a few times to listen to for people to be able to absorb what it is you're saying. And we're called to even meditate on your own words and on the words of the saints, because this, I spoke before about the Celtic heart within us, and the idea of our past and our ancestors have very much been drawn to this spiritual world. We talk about the Celtic Catholic spirituality or Celtic Christian spirituality. So in one sense, it's something that deep within us we are familiar with and we're drawn to, but in another sense, it's going to take a lot of work to be able to take time out and dwell within. Now, a lot of people seem to find this time out for example, with many of the New Age practices. You know, there's now an explosion of Eastern meditations, yoga, all sorts of New Age practices that people have been sucked in. Can you explain the difference between the Catholic meditation and very many of the meditations that we're finding in community centres right around the country?
Yes, there's a massive difference, and I do wish people would understand it. There's a huge difference. Essentially, the foundational principle of those other meditation practices, you know, it's about two things. In the case, say, of Buddhist practice, which is, you know, very many interesting practices, but that's about a transformation of your consciousness, your awareness, and, you know, and it's a practice in that, which is a human kind of natural ability if you take time out to do it, right? So it's a sort of struggle with it. But there's also the other element to it, which is a kind of, you get there by your efforts. You know, you struggle with the practice and struggle with the practice, and eventually one day you'll get enlightenment or whatever. And it's a constant lifetime thing of efforts. Christian meditation is completely different. It's not about those things. It's not about achieving a sort of a self-fulfillment through meditation practice or a transformation of our consciousness. Christian meditation is about a communion of love. And the love is between the soul and the divine. And it's growing in a loving relationship. And it is Jesus, through his Holy Spirit, who transforms us into his image, the one whom we love, so that we become like him. And it's his work. We're just there. We don't have to achieve anything. You know, we just come to be with him. And he then sees, well, here's this person's come to me. Now I can start to transform her or him. Whereas the other practices, it's self-effort, self-striving, and self-achievement. And that is not our way at all.
And what would you say to someone who says, you know, but I get so much peace from what I'm doing, and what's the harm in it? And, you know, they don't see any danger in these practices. Would you say anything to them with regard to that?
Well, there are certain practices, there is no harm in them. Just sitting quietly out in nature, enjoying the sun and the garden, and having a certain sense of mindfulness about what's around you. That's a good start in meditation practice. That's okay. That sort of thing is no harm. Now, there are other forms of meditation that are dangerous if you open yourself up to the spirit world. But that's a huge topic. You need to do another interview on that one.
Yeah, maybe we will, sister. Maybe we'll invite you back, because I know it's very much a prevalent issue at the
it's
minute.
dangerous.
Very dangerous, and it's something that we would explore, because I know we have a lot of viewers who have a lot of questions, a lot of family members who are, you know, involved in these practices, and it's very difficult to, you know, share the truth about them without sounding just like you know, that you're a panic monger, or that you're trying to scare people. So I just wanted to conclude with regard to Tom, and this is another big issue, but there are a lot of talk at the minute about signs of the end times. You know, that what we're witnessing in these days, the various apostasies and various you know, the unprecedented times that we are facing. People would say that this is it, this is the end times. How would you respond to people, and how do these meditations help us to cope with whether it is or whether it isn't?
Yeah. Well, in a sense, yes, these are the signs of the end times. And there is a certain sense among people, you know, there's something, we're on the edge of something. There's a sense, people have a sense of that. And it's kind of universal, you know. Yeah. So I would say there is something to be said for that kind of awareness, that maybe this is close to the end times. However, in terms of our Catholic faith, I think we have to bear in mind a couple of things. That there is a distinction in the gospel that Jesus makes between the end of the age and the end of the world. They're not necessarily the same thing. And so this age is, to me, coming to an end. Yes, I think it is, because everything is breaking down. So there are signs, and they're clear, and the climate, the whole thing, everything. But don't forget our Blessed Lady in her apparitions at Fatima, and also I think some of the indicators in Medjugorje, where she says, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. and there will be an era of peace. So somehow or another, we are mounting towards a climax of where something is going to happen. I would tend to take that view myself, because things are gone so badly wrong. God is leading it to a climax in some way, but it may not be the end of the world. And that it could be the beginnings of Our Blessed Lady's triumph beginning to be manifested, because everyone is going to turn back to God as a result of the absolute horrendous consequences of their choices, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would tend to take a view on that scale, all right. Mm-hmm.
But it is one of hopefulness, like, because I you know, some people would get very scared thinking, oh, this is
No,
the end, and there's a terror, a fear, but that's not what our faith
no,
teaches us.
no, 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 no. Jesus is always in charge. You may be absolutely, he knows every single thing that's going on. He said, not one hair falls out of your head, but your father doesn't know about it. I mean, you're not even worried about them, but the father knows, oh, she lost a hair today. But, you know, every detail is known to God,
Every
and
detail.
God is in charge of everything. And God is, in divine wisdom, is bringing history towards its fulfillment. And so, no, he's in charge. And Our Blessed Lady has promised that a great time of peace will come, and it will be through her Immaculate Heart. That's what she said. And so Jesus knows that that's where it's heading towards, but sometimes he has to let us experience the pain of our own wrong choices. And so there may be some hard things that we have to encounter, and are encountering now, actually.
Yeah, well, you
Mhm.
know, we said that very much at the, you know, after the abortion referendum, you know, that the people who make those choices are really going to suffer grievously, even on this earth. You know, we're not, you know, obviously there's
Mhm.
consequences from an eternal perspective, but the
Yeah,
pain associated with abortion, the pain associated with the loss of a child, you know,
yeah,
these are the consequences of our actions, the pain of social breakdown, of the breakdown of families, of people not
that's
knowing
right.
who they are, where they come
That's
from.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
we are seeing a great, and
Mhm.
if our hearts are moved to mercy for those people who are suffering the consequences of their own actions or their own decisions, how much more must the Lord's
Exactly.
heart
Yeah,
be moved in mercy
yeah.
for them? So it is a time of course, it is, you know, there's a heightened sense of maybe fear or confusion, but what we want to do through our broadcast is really to give people hope,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
we want to thank you for your broadcast, and we're looking forward to the next. When can we look forward to the second installment then of your
Uh,
meditation series?
my plan is to do one a month, so sometime in October. And this one is going to be, I think, really fascinating, because it's the great mystical teacher, Saint Teresa of Avila.
Oh,
So you can
wow.
look forward to that.
Excellent,
Yes.
we will. And we'll
Mhm.
invite all of our listeners to pray for you, to pray for all the poor Clares
Please,
in
please,
Faughart
please.
and
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
Carlingford, and to thank you
Yeah.
for your witness. Often it's the silent witness of our sisters and brothers within the consecrated
Mhm.
communities around Ireland. So we want to thank you for all that you're doing. And really, I think,
Thanks,
you
Lisa.
know, we said it before, or I've heard it said before, that you go beyond. It's like, you know, the Star Wars, you're going right into the beyond for
That's
us,
right.
that you can help us to make our baby steps
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
towards that same destination. So, Sister
Mhm.
Breach, thank you very, very much for your time, and
Uh,
God bless.
God bless. Lovely talking to you, Lisa. Take care. Bye.